Intro one, intro one. Intro one, intro one. Intro one, intro one.
How we all doing?
Swell.
Good. It was extremely hot here yesterday, so I feel like I'm still recovering from that. How hot? It was like 35. I know it's not Australian hot, but it's stealing valor from Michael, from Michael's hot environment.
Now, it's been brought to my attention that Australians just whinge about the heat because DJ Highland reckons it's the same temperature in Texas.
But maybe everyone in Texas has more AC and everything, you know?
Yeah, Tess doesn't let me run the AC because she cares about the environment.
Well, aren't you satisfied when you're sweating your ass off that at least you're making a imperceptible difference in the world?
Yeah.
Is this the same in Australia? There's like a pride thing that comes from people here. They're like, I don't even have an air conditioner. It's like, that's awful.
You know, it's like someone who's been living in a share house forever, how they still brag about not having a TV.
I don't know.
Watch network television.
I do both those things, honestly. One thing I did watch recently, though, was the new Top Gun. And I have to say, it's fucking awesome. It's so good.
Give us the lowdown.
It's like a true traditional summer blockbuster. Like, for instance, like it has the same pacing as an older blockbuster. It's kind of melodramatic. There's a frivolous love story. There's even a kind of a sex scene, which you're not going to see in a Marvel movie, obviously.
Right.
It's also meant to prove to 50-somethings that they still got some gas in the tank.
Do you remember? This was a while ago now, but when the blockbuster was seen as the end, the end point, the destruction of film, and now it seems like, oh, those were kind of nice compared to what we have now.
Yeah.
But it's it feels like a classic movie experience. In fact, when it starts, the first thing you see is Tom Cruise sitting in a theater, staring you deep in the eyes, thanking you for seeing it in theaters, and you feel like you're part of history.
Top Gun pushing the boundaries of it's a breaking of the fourth wall.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, so let's check it out.
Yeah, I'll see that.
Yeah, I saw you gave it a 5-star rating, Peter.
Yeah, well, I went to 5 and then went to 4.5 because it's not a perfect movie, but it's nearly perfect.
I mean, any movie with Tom Cruise in it is nearly perfect. I would say.
He has such a appreciation of the craft.
The last thing I saw him in was, what's that, Ben Stiller, Tropic Thunder?
Oh man, you got to watch the latest Mission Impossible movies. They're great.
Definitely.
But also Tropic Thunder is one of the last true good comedy movies, I feel like.
Yeah, yet to be cancelled.
Amazing that it hasn't, but
yeah, I caught like 20 minutes of it when I had COVID. And I was like, shit, how the fuck is this still on the air when they'll pull episodes of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
maybe because it's just so patently like ridiculous. Like he's an Australian.
Well, it's very unfair representation of Australians.
I thought it was pretty accurate. Basically how I see you.
So no Jake on this episode.
No Jake. We tried. He tried to give him credit, but no dice. Flying without our wingman on this one, as they would say in Top Gun.
Man, that's you to a T. Everything comes back to Top Gun.
The funny thing is the first one kind of sucks.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. So
I haven't seen the first Top Gun. I don't think I haven't seen Top Gun.
I don't really think the first one's even worth watching. It's like, I don't know, 80s action.
The first one is about being homophobic. That's what the movie is about.
Well, it's subtly, it's like, but it's at the same time like in true coincidence of opposites. It's quite gay at the same time.
That's Tarantino's argument as well, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
But
is
the
it?
the thing is like I don't know, 80s action movies, like some of them are really good, but they're all like quite corny. 90s is when the action movie was perfected, I think.
It was. It attained its highest form.
Uh, another another preamble. I had a dream the other day where this is so boring, and I was arguing with someone about Kojev's interpretation of Hegel, and that the thesis this was in fact wrong, and that was the dream. What do you think it means?
Having that dream alone is probably worthy of you seeing an analyst.
Yeah,
I don't Raymond Queneau what it means.
I don't get
Too
that.
much of a deep cut.
Yeah, unpack that for me, Will.
Raymond Queneau was a French writer who was the one to publish Kojev's writings on Hegel. Oh, deep cut.
That is a deep cut.
Okay, so before we launch into this episode, this is a public episode, right?
Yeah.
If you want to hear more episodes, you can find them on our Patreon, $5 a month. It's a very simple subscription method. I believe it's an email, maybe debit card situation. 5 minutes, right? Yeah. Yeah, we'd appreciate it, and it's the how you say the cost of a latte a month. Come on, give up a latte a month. Your beloved lattes.
You damn yuppie.
Yeah, we got a reading group going in the Discord for Beyond the Pleasure Principle. It's starting soon.
Very exciting.
Cool. We got Discord. There's a very nice atmosphere in there. It's not as shitty as the rest of the internet. It's like refined Reddit.
Should we say anything about? It seems like we're doing a every 2 week thing.
Yeah.
Should we say anything about that?
Well, we could just say that the pace of the podcast is a bit slower right now. The summer being what it is, and life.
It's not quite that open endedness of the pandemic anymore. We all have jobs to do.
I'm going feral and going on a farm for a month. And
When's that?
in a few weeks. But I actually might be able to like call in like shitty equipment wise, like he did from the Hamptons. So
My rugged expedition to the Hamptons.
yeah.
So we're doing okay, so we went to Žižek's 2020 book, it says on the inner page, but I distinctly remember buying it in 2019.
Yeah.
I thought it was 2019 as well, but maybe it's like a car release. It's always the next year.
I think that's it, yeah.
The Ford Publishing Company.
This is Sex in the Field Absolute by Slavoj. And I have said this on the podcast a number of times. I think it's one of his best books, if not his best book.
Yeah.
It is really good, yeah. And for any maniacs out there who maintain that Žižek is an unserious philosopher, try reading the section on Möbius Strip that we did today.
Yeah, it's pretty intensive. For any maniac who thinks that he's not a serious philosopher, and also for some reason is listening to this podcast, but maybe some people hate listening to it. That's also a possibility.
Right. Yeah, this run of like the parallax view, less than nothing, incontinence of the void, disparities, absolute recoil, sex in the field, absolute. Crazy run.
Yeah.
That's an amazing run.
And then whatever, like 5 publications we're going to get in the next 12 months.
Yeah, what's the next one? There's one like this in July, right?
Yeah, there's one on surplus enjoyment coming out this year. And then at the beginning of next year, there's one called Žižek Responds, where there's like 12 essays by other theorists, and each one Žižek responds to.
Cool.
That sounds cool.
Reply to My Critics, I think it's called. Got some Todd
Uh,
McGowan in there.
Good old Todd, Dare
Yeah.
Todd.
Danny Nobis. Yeah, lots of Richard Boothby. Bunch of crazy big hitters.
I'm reading this Alain Badiou book, the Communist Hypothesis, and it's got a letter to Slavoj at the end, and he says at the very beginning, he says, "Your introduction to the verso edition of Mao's philosophical political text is, as always, of very great interest. Let me begin by refuting, as I usually do, your reputation as a showman and conceptual poser, a very French misrepresentation. But let's not worry that they said the same thing about our master Lacan, and by saying that your introduction is honest, profound, and brave." Thought that was nice. I just wanted to
That is
include
nice.
that.
Yeah, it's nice. Nice to add. Much like this podcast, honest, profound, and brave.
True. So the Möbius strip. I've got a Möbius strip joke.
Right.
What unorientables do you find in the sea? Möbius dick.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Did you make that up?
I stole it.
Nice. What do you steal from?
No citations.
Okay. Yeah. Just say that you stole it and move on.
Yeah, it was some random maths website where they had a series of like really shitty maths jokes.
Oh,
I
you say
recently read
maths,
Moby
right?
Dick. Yeah.
Oh, you read it. What do you think?
It's amazing. It's an amazing book. Crazy. Yeah, it was real. Yeah, it's just that reminder. Every single one of those books from the canon that everybody recommends to you, and for some reason you just take your time to get around to, and you read it, and you're like, God damn, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Holds up. Stands up to that reputation.
But have you read another book that you've never heard of from roughly the same era that does kind of the same thing? Because that's also canon, right?
This is fair. Yeah.
Well, that's the way that like the reimagining of the canon works these days. They take something like a lesser thing that no one at the time ever really heard of and hold it up as being influential.
I took a class on the canon, and the definition that the professor conveyed, I thought was really good, was a work that's canonical, or the greatness of a work has to do with its capacity to be continually reread at in different eras, different epochs. The quality of the work, the openness of the work.
Žižek says something similar about it, actually.
Yeah, and I think you can insert there like T.S. Eliot's notion of the kind of retroactivity of the great works, that once a new work comes and is recognized, it kind of reshuffles that which came before to include it.
Yeah, reshuffles is good there, because usually when we talk about retroactivity, we get a little bit lost or stumble on it, but reshuffling is kind of handy there.
Yeah, because it doesn't necessarily like cancel something out, but it conveys a different perspective on, or like a parallax on, the other works to which it's related.
Yeah.
And in that sense, it's kind of a set of relations. That's kind of nice, I think.
Yeah,
Between
like
these works.
kind of like Top Gun.
Yeah, exactly.
Just kind of like Top Gun. All right, so Pete chose this episode. What's the go?
Yeah,
Pete?
because well, I chose it because the Möbius strip has always been a very interesting Žižekian concept to me, and I remember when I initially came across it, it was like kind of like lightning striking. It's an example. It's a Žižekian example, but he's also making kind of like a literal claim about the structure of reality through it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the kind of topology of reality, as he puts it. So it's doing that thing that Žižekian examples do, where like through the example, it expands the theory itself.
And it also draws in this connection between Hegel and Lacan, who both mention the Möbius strip. Hegel calls it the inverted eight. And I remember I was reading, I think it's in Hegel's Logic. I was reading that, and that came up, and I was like, "Oh,
It's pretty crazy." Yeah, that they both mention it, especially Hegel. It's really cool. Honestly, I was surprised that Lacan mentioned it as well. But of course, this might be due to the fact that I've read very little Lacan.
Yeah.
As any good Žižekian has done.
Yeah, so topology is huge for Lacan. Möbius strips features like throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I know, bruh.
But so Žižek starts here. He's talking about Hegel's system. Is contrary to the general notion of Hegel's system as being this kind of like totalizing machine. This with an attempt to make it kind of smooth running, and one thing leading sort of logically and typically into running logically into another. He says it's rather a chain of failures, blockages, deadlocks, at each point trying to reverse a defeat into a way out by stepping back and changing the coordinates. Mm. The claim that Hegel's dialectical procedure mirrors reality itself. I love that. Like Žižek says here that like in Hegel's writing, there's this dialectical procedure that is also there in reality, which is what Hegel is doing, what Hegel says he's doing. But I love the kind of like monstrosity of that claim that like Hegel's dialectics is the dialectics of reality itself.
Yeah, well, yeah, like the structure, the phenomenology is that like no sooner does he describe a particular phenomenon does he reach its limits, only to move beyond those limits in the next chapter.
Yeah, to move through the contradiction.
Yeah,
into a new form.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that objection being dominant even at like initially in Hegel's time with Schopenhauer and Kierkegaard, objecting to that, as you say, totalizing nature of his system.
Mm-hmm. Which Žižek says brings us to the axiomatic premise of Sex in the Field Absolute, that things exist, EX-SIST, they exist out of their own impossibility. Their condition of impossibility, the obstacle which prevents the full actualization of their potentials, is their condition of possibility. So there's some kind of movement here that he's trying to get to, which he goes on to immediately label concrete universality.
Yeah, so I mean, how does something exist? How is someone's existence based on its own impossibility? Like initially, that's a kind of contradictory and confusing statement.
Yeah.
And the answer is concrete universality, a universality that he writes, which is not just the common denominator of its particular forms, but the name of a tension or antagonism or gap of the impossibility of becoming what it is, to actualize its potentials and its particular forms, or the ultimately failed attempts to resolve its constitutive deadlock. So like, yes, something can never be fully what it is, but what it is something that is never fully what it is.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about that. Like, it's a very nice example of his of the trash receptacles, right?
Yeah, let's explain that.
That like the universal form of garbage. This is a funny distinction. Actually, in America, they call it trash. Anyway, it just seems so American to me. The universal form of garbage becomes so the genus garbage finds its truth in one of its species, which are divided between recyclables, compostables, paper recycling, and the mysterious X, which is the black bag, the garbage itself.
Yeah, garbage as such.
Garbage as a species, there as one amongst other forms of garbage, is the inner, or is the concrete universal of garbage itself.
Yeah, the universal of garbage is found in the sequence of particular forms of garbage.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, interestingly,
that receptacle into which the things that are unspecified, that are just sort of garbage as such, go, right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also,
and the logo. Yeah, go.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think we're gonna say the same thing, but I started saying it first. So
you may have
you.
You can have
the recycling image is a Möbius strip.
Yeah.
I think it. Oh, it is. It is. Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
So, like another example he draws on is the example of state. The state can never be a true state, a harmonious unity of its parts, and different forms of state are attempts to resolve or rather obfuscate this deadlock.
Yeah, I mean, and if you think about it in like very mundane terms, like the Democrats or Republicans always have a very like they always have their specific views on what would finally fix the inequalities or insufficiencies in a society, but it's never a goal that is to be reached, and yet the state still exists. It's always incomplete. It's in this process of becoming whatever it is, but never reaching it. Or I mean, even yourself, like at any moment in your life, you feel as though you are who you are, but that feeling becomes undermined by the later version you have of yourself, image you have of yourself.
That's interesting. And there's a rare shout out to art here from Žižek, who doesn't tend to talk about art very much. He says, the same goes for art. Particular forms of art are attempts to resolve the deadlock inscribed into their very notion.
I put a little question mark there, like I wanted to talk about what he means by that.
I think it's something like art being an attempt to confront the deadlock in the very form of art itself. That like art is an attempt to deal with a certain central antagonism.
Or is like art as expression. There's always, an attempt to express something in art.
But it's kind of expressing the deadlock itself, because art is like kind of discontinuous with reality as such.
Yeah, if you look at like the work, let's say I'll just use Picasso. Like, you're not going to reduce his art to a specific piece.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Kind of totality. Like there's the movements of Picasso's art. There's the ideal of it, let's say.
Well, what Žižek says about Picasso is like the Picasso of kind of like the event of his own art in Guernica. Like, remember we talked about that a few months ago, but it's a common example of his, like when he sees the trucks, the military trucks going by.
Yeah,
and he says to his friend, like, we did this.
Yeah,
as in
the military officer goes to a studio and
okay, I got it wrong.
Yeah. What painting is that? What's it called again?
Guernica.
Yeah. Today, just by coincidence, I saw Mick Jagger's Instagram, and he visited that painting yesterday. You'd be happy to know.
Good for him.
Big smile on his face.
Anyway, I think we haven't quite gotten to the art thing there, but it's a tough point.
Yeah, because I think he must be referencing something Hegel wrote.
He has his examples. Go, Pete.
Yeah, well, just to repeat the line, he says, the same goes for art. Particular forms of art are attempts to resolve the deadlock inscribed into their very notion.
He points to Duchamp's toilet and asks, like, how would you situate that if that toilet had been framed as an art object? Because the breaking away, so the gap that's produced by just having it hanging on the wall as a modernist gap.
Well, like maybe we could say that piece only makes sense when you view it in relation to the art movements of the time and the history before that. Like, part of the outrage people have around that type of art is that the context of it is lost. Like for maybe people who don't know, like just the image itself strikes someone as like, okay, this is bullshit. Like, is this art? But when you view it in terms of like the very kind of like specific regulations and notions people had of art at the time, it's much more interesting that it's a subversion of those things.
And he does mention that as Derrida put it, the frame itself is inframed by a part of its content, the blind spot in the image. Rather than it being framed in this literal way, like the content of the artwork provides a frame by which to view it as a piece of art and not just as a urinal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool.
And that's concrete universality.
Yeah. Do you say urinal, Michael, or urinal?
Piss trough.
Really?
It's a beautifully poetic language, Australian.
Yeah.
But he's getting there to this, like, to tie that up, like the kind of the contradiction at the root of art. I think that's an interesting avenue to go down, maybe at a later date.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the most interesting things about art is its movement, right? It's when a specific type, school of art becomes stultified, there's an inversion that happens where its opposite becomes dominant.
Mhm.
and its opposite is interesting because it is opposite.
Right.
When
That's very true.
reality depiction was valued above all else, the work of the Impressionists was subversive.
Yeah.
When Impressionism becomes the dominant school, then it becomes undermined by
Abstractionism. Yeah.
abstractionism, cubism, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Surrealism.
Mhm.
Yeah. We'll do an episode on. Žižek had a recent article on non-representational art that we can do.
Cool.
Okay, so do we want to talk about this 1-2 shit?
Well, let's. Okay, so we did the first part. We did the first 2 paragraphs. I think we're making we're milking a lot out of this. This is good. We don't have to do the Mao one now.
Nah, fuck that.
Yeah, fuck.
You can quickly explain to me, one of you, both of you, the 1 divides into 2 thing. I've come across this so many fucking times. I've read it in Badu. I've read it everywhere.
Well, the 1 divides into 2 is a Mao slogan, right?
Yep.
And Žižek wants to take the opposite. What if it's the complete opposite? He says the 2 divides into 1. And I think this is a claim about, like, in some ways, it's a claim about the multiple, about Badu's notion of the multiple. Whether or not it's ontologically, which is primary. Is it the multiple or is it the 1?
Right.
And for Žižek, it's the 1, but it's a barred 1. It's an impossible 1. So, like, from the strict dialectical standpoint, 1, he says, is not the name for unity, but for a reflexive self-division. So 2 divided into 1 means that the external opposition of 2 complementary poles, whose harmony is the unity of the 1, is transposed into the immanent contradiction of the 1.
Yep.
When you think about it, Möbius strip wise, actually,
Exactly. Möbius strip wise, it's composed of apparently 2 sides that pass into the same side.
So maybe I'll just read his description of a Möbius strip for anyone who I'm sure that is not the case, but doesn't know what a Möbius strip is.
We should do that.
The Möbius strip is a surface with only one side, one embedded in 3-dimensional Euclidean space, and only one boundary, which has the mathematical property of being unorientable. An example of a Möbius strip can be created by taking a paper strip and giving it a half twist, and then joining the ends of the strip in the form of a loop. A line drawn starting from the seam down the middle meets back at the seam, but at the other side. When continued, the line meets at the starting point and is double the length of the original strip. If you want to go online and watch a very annoying video of Neil deGrasse Tyson demonstrating this, you can find it on YouTube.
Yeah, I did that one, unfortunately.
Fuck Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah.
So there's something, the suggestion that there is an object with one side that exists in 3-dimensional space. It's
a scandal.
There is such an object.
It just seems kind of wrong. Like you're holding it and it's like there are 2 sides to this thing. And then you move it around and you discover that it's only one, but there's always this kind of like point at which it switches that you never really arrive at.
Right.
Say you're viewing an image of it. There is a twist, but the twist of it is kind of on the other side.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really good demonstration of kind of a parallax view where based on your perspective, there's a switch in reality itself.
Yeah. So there's a simultaneous inside and outside.
Yeah. So Lacan would say it's extimate, right? It has an external intimacy.
Exactly.
I've got a brief history of topology thing, which I think is helpful. So basically started with this bloke trying to work out how to cross a bunch of bridges without going over any of them twice to get around a city. And it became a branch of mathematics that essentially abstracts or distills a space to its essential properties. So when we talk about space, it can be geographical space or the space for signifiers, relational space. All of that can be conceptualized topologically. So a chain of signifiers in a signifying network contains spaces. And Freud had his, what he called witch metapsychology, disparagingly, with his topographical models. So the conscious, preconscious, unconscious, and the id, ego, superego. But the point about the unorientables is that they retain their properties regardless of their deformations. So it keeps its essential topologically significant characteristics. And with Lacan, the division between like the unconscious and conscious unlike Freud's topographies, it's not a difference between surface and depth. So it's for Lacan, it's external and intimate at the same time, and the Möbius band gives us that image.
Yeah, and if you think, he immediately relates this to dialectics, obviously. So he says, let's begin with the coincidence of opposites as the basic principle of dialectics. The common view, which reduces this coincidence to the notion of reality as a permanent struggle of opposing tendencies, has nothing whatsoever to do with dialectics proper. The dialectical coincidence of opposites refers to something much more precise, to a twisted or convoluted space in which a line, brought to its extreme, punctually coincides with its opposite. So dialectics is the movement of something into its opposite. And if you think of the topology of the Möbius strip, let's say if you take one side as, as a thing, and you follow the line to the other side, that thing becomes its opposite. It is on the opposite side, and then again, if you move beyond, it becomes it's itself again.
He says the circle is here not closed. It's redoubling points towards the abyss of impossibility.
Yeah.
In trying to approach the thing that it is, or to become what it is, it has to kind of, by way of, he says, trying to catch up with itself, and to overcome that impossibility, it has to, in a sense, sort of tarry with its own impossibility and negate itself.
So his example of this is his initial example is Francisco Franco, the dictator of Spain, says
his nephew or something is like, Franco, what should I do with my life?
Yeah, Franco's like, you got to be like me.
Yeah, he says, be like me, just do your job and avoid having anything to do with politics.
Right.
So like the joke being, it's ridiculous that the dictator thinks that his dictating has nothing to do with politics, and that this fascistic view that fascism somehow stands outside of the realm of politics is politics as such.
Yeah,
the division of you versus another, the kind of separation of.
Yeah. And I think that applies equally to Žižek's claims about the ideological subject, who says that I am non-ideological, I am apolitical, which is itself the finest example of political thinking or ideological thinking possible. Like this notion of like the liberal who stands at the end of history and is satisfied with the running of things and the logic of the comprehensible world, who says to themselves, I exist wholly and apolitically in a sensible world, but this is its own, the political gesture par excellence.
Yeah, sure, change would be good, but it's impossible in this world, so we must accept the small gains we can make.
The same goes for any appeal to bipartisanship, or like when someone says we don't need an ideological response.
Mm-hmm. This is the most ideological response.
Yeah. Because politics itself is a cut, and the appeal here is that no, we don't need one. Where being political runs that line through along the Möbius strip all the way to being apolitical.
Yeah. Politics thus reaches its peak in a gesture of self-denial. To be political as such is to present oneself as apolitical.
Yeah, so
that's in fascism, but I think that the Žižek is drawing a link here implicitly between, or I would say there's a link implicitly between what he said about liberals and fascists in the sense of its self-conception as being apolitical.
But yeah, just to kind of spell it out, maybe that the concept, the politics, fascism, whatever, through its own definition of itself becomes its opposite.
Right.
As follow the line. Yeah.
As in its self-conception as being apolitical finds its opposite in it being a political statement.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So moving on, he gives an example from a Cindy Pollock movie. Interesting, also the director of Parallax View. Have you seen this movie, Michael?
Nah.
The Way We Were?
Yeah.
Have you guys?
No, I haven't
seen it.
It kind of seems like it could be good.
Yeah, I don't follow all of Žižek's film references.
Nah.
Yeah, so moving on after this point about dialectics. I mean, he makes a few examples, as we said, of fascism, anti-Semitism, The Way We Were. But his next main theoretical point is that there's a point here about negation of negation. He writes, "This is how the Möbius strip provides a model for what Hegel calls negation of negation. External contingent reality to which we are exposed is gradually symbolized, internalized. Its meaningful and rational structure is gradually revealed. Contingency is sublated into deeper necessity." So there's a kind of meaning of contingency and necessity in the Möbius strip. I think it's actually a very interesting description of how those things coincide. His example is psychoanalysis, where in treatment, what appears as a contingent act or moment is the grain of sand which forms the pearl of a symptom. That what appears contingent was actually necessary.
Yeah, he says that it's reified as an expression of a meaningful symbolic structure. So how does contingency emerge as necessity? So he goes on to use Hegel and the monarch, right? So in the case of Hegel and the monarch, the kingness is experienced as a necessity out of the biological contingency itself.
Yes, necessary to have a monarch, but who that monarch is utterly contingent.
Yeah, the contingency of
It's a great
birth.
example. It's more
Yeah.
contingent than it being like by merit or something.
Exactly.
So he's trying to get away from this notion of dialectics as a play between opposites.
Mm-hmm.
And he introduces the Möbius strip and equates it with the notion of a quilting point, like the quilting point of the symbolic process that throws us back to the beginning as a contingent element of the real. I was reading all this and the quotes that you were reading before, and it made me think of a debate I was having the other night with some friends about the Woody Allen film Midnight in Paris. And I think there are two obvious readings of the movie, or rather, there's the obvious like criticism of the movie that it's just sort of hapless romanticism and silly.
Mm-hmm.
Which to begin with, I would say that that's kind of a very obvious level what the movie is about. But just in the sense of it's like there's like this. I end up writing this whole paragraph about this. I don't know if it's
Do
at all
it.
useful.
This is a pro Owen Wilson podcast. Let's go.
Yeah, right, of course, yeah. So there's a basic reading that says that Paris in the 20s was better than it is today. But we're shown through the film the cracks that appear in this image when Mariam Cotard's character's golden age, for she lives in the 20s, is revealed to be a previous era in the Belle Epoque. She sees in her contemporary Paris of the 20s all the inconsistencies, failures, and disappointments that Owen Wilson sees in the Paris of 2011. But the movie is also a comment on love, where Gil, Owen Wilson's character, and his wife, played by Rachel McAdams, are these opposites. He loves reading and writing. She disdains it as romantic fancy. He loves Paris in the rain at midnight. She thinks it's cold and wet and too late. She wants to dance. He wants to walk. The movie sets her up as the opposite to the woman, Mariam Cotard's character in the 20s. But what is the true romantic love relation at the end of the film? It's with Léa Seydoux character, who comes seemingly out of nowhere. They meet in a purely contingent way, outside the real drama of the movie, when he hears the Cole Porter song, this, to quote Žižek, a piece of raw contingent real. Thus, the interplay, I'm getting all academic here. Thus, the interplay between opposites in the film, present, past, further past, realist, sentimentalist, frigid, romantic, Rachel McAdams, Marion Cotard, is subverted in this return to the present, but a present constellation transformed by the passage of meeting this piece of the real through Léa Seydoux's character in the form of a quilting point, an element of the contingent real. So Léa Seydoux is an interruption in this duality between present and the past, McAdams and Cotard's characters. Which makes it,
And then it always seems when they end up together, it seems like it was kind of meant to be that it
Exactly.
was, that contingent moment was necessary.
yeah.
Yeah, the necessity
Very well
of
put.
contingency comes
Exactly,
around
yeah.
in the Möbius strip.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
I love that movie.
Yeah,
I
I had a
love the
really
movie.
great time.
I really
Yeah.
love it. I've always been against. People have always been like, "Oh, that's such a stupid movie." And
Yeah,
it's like,
people
no,
hate it,
You're
dude.
stupid.
He's like Woody Allen is aware that it's corny. Like all the things that you're saying, he
It's
knows.
explicitly said in the movie. That's obvious what the movie is commenting
Yeah.
on. Actually, I just want to hammer home with another quote here. Like in this movie, what is first experienced as a meaningless external contingency, meeting Léa Seydoux's character in this flea market, is gradually revealed to be the moment of the subject's inner fate, a reified expression of the turmoil of his inner life as part of the meaningful symbolic structure. So like this turmoil of like which to decide upon, the present and the past, this woman, this French woman, or his fiance, and
It's neither.
yeah, it's this contingent moment,
Yeah.
which is the moment of love.
Yeah,
early in the
so,
movie.
like the moment of love. If the appointment in Samara was love, not death.
Very nice. The point at which the signifier falls into the signified, like the signifier here is what, like in the movie, it's the romance of having the love in Paris.
Yeah, it's midnight in Paris. That's like it's totally it's evocative of an entire way of life, of an entire image of the world,
And it comes out of the kind of like, as he says here, like the suture between the two fields of like the polarity of the movie and the signifier. I mean, like maybe it's silly to say, but like the signifier of Léa Seydoux' character they fall back into the signified of Paris at the end.
the film is an attempt to say those things, like the ideal of midnight in Paris is not really what it is, but in the end, it actually does become that for him. So like again, there's another reversal. Like it's not in the Belle Epoque, it's not in the 20s, but it is now.
And it's in the contradiction between like the feeling of which is better or preferable or literally which one you can occupy. Good movie.
It's good, and I love the part where Hemingway is like,
You'll never write well if you fear dying. Do you?
Yeah, I do. I'd say might be my greatest fear, actually.
Well, it's something all men before you have done, all men will do.
I know.
Have you ever made love to a truly great woman?
Actually, my fiancée is pretty sexy.
And when you make love to her, you feel true and beautiful passion, and you, for at least that moment, lose your fear of death.
No, that doesn't happen.
I believe that love that is true and real creates a respite from death. All cowardice comes from not loving or not loving well, which is the same thing. And when the man who is brave and true looks death squarely in the face, like some rhino hunters I know, or Belmonte, who's truly brave, it is because they love with sufficient passion to push death out of their minds, until it returns as it does to all men. And then you must make really good love again. Think about it.
and then he's like, think about it.
Anyway, back to the Möbius Strip.
Yeah, well, a good. So we got.
Oh, but we should definitely say, we got to say this, and I can't believe we haven't said it already. The Möbius Strip is one of three unorientables, as they're called, but is the kind of like basic topological depiction of the subject.
reality. He also says reality.
But we're talking the ontological role of the subject in the constitution of reality,
Yes,
right?
yes,
in the Žižekian sense. The point at which the objective field is wrapped into itself through subjective perception of it, neither being primary, but each being in this kind of dialectical relation.
Yeah, there's two sides. There's the universal and the particular, and wouldn't you know, they're both the same side.
And you could say like one side, if one side is spirit and one side is subject, it's very obvious to see how they each operate as the other, that spirit falls into itself, wins to its truth through the other side and returning to itself as subject.
Yeah, and there's that switch, that subjective switch, that bend in the band of the Möbius strip, which is the subject.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to maybe finish off his theoretical claim about the Möbius strip, we got dialectics, we got negation of negation, and he finally, to kind of bring the whole point home, he writes, "It's time now to introduce some conceptual order in this series of examples of which illustrates a particular feature or version of the Möbius strip reversal. The first step to be made is to specify the two sides of the Möbius strip are those of the signifier and signified. So at the point of intersection is the point at which, as Lacan put it, signifier falls into the signified." So yeah, this is where Hegel meets Lacan for Žižek, the signifier and the signified, the universal and the particular, and how, just as the process we were describing with Hegel, as is for Lacan, the signifier is made, as we were saying earlier, part of the signifying chain.
Mm-hmm. Through its encounter with what it's not.
In that sense, that the sign is dialectically opposed to other signs, and that might be extraneous to what we're talking about.
Well, yeah, it's important to know that language as a system of what's the word? Differential system. So language is a differential system. Language is separate to the reality that it refers to, which renders language incomplete, non-all. But that separation is constitutive of language itself. That's the obstacle that allows language to emerge.
Which is also the same, has to do with the structure of subjectivity.
Exactly.
So like the bar in the sign, which is transposed into the sign, the barred S is Lacan's symbol for the subject. So there's the subject and the master signifier. There's the signifying chain, the signifier, signified rather, and that which gives orientation to those signifiers, the master signifier. So like one side of this Möbius strip is the master signifier, and the other is he doesn't say it here, but I think you can justifiably use this signifier represents the subject for another signifier. Yeah. If you look at it, the Möbius strip as a movement, which it obviously is, like the movement where it comes back into itself, having traversed its opposite side, which is also it's the same. How do you say this?
A signifier never fully corresponds to a signified, and it's caught in this cycle on the Möbius strip. But what sutures it is the pointer capiton or the master signifier that holds it in place. But the signifier falls into the signifier with the designation of a name, and the name is the master signifier. But there's always a surplus that produces the dynamic.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, language is an attempt to describe reality, the world, and it's ultimately insufficient to fully describe the world, because if it did, it would be the world.
It would be the world, yeah.
But it still functions as a way of describing the world.
Yeah, but I think that you can add something there and say that the incompleteness of language is the attempt to fill the incompleteness of being itself. Mm-hmm. So which is also this position of the subject, that if being Žižek, I forget which book this is in. I think it's actually in
Continence.
Oh, maybe it is. No, it's not. It is. I don't know. It's either Incontinence or Sex in the Field Absolute, where he's saying this, that the incompleteness at the root of being is expressed by language. Language is the attempt to complete the incompleteness of being, and it fails.
Yes, is another way of saying it is that the very incompleteness of language itself is a proof of the incompleteness of being.
Yeah, I think Žižek's claim is even stronger. Like if, Peter, you said this before, if being were complete, there would not be language.
Yeah, so what appears like an obstacle, which is some excess beyond our experience or knowledge, that being or reality is like this excessive thing. It appears like if we knew, then it would be a complete system. But it's actually the lack in being itself which allows or constitutes language itself in the first place.
Exactly. As Žižek would say, it's the condition for its possibility. It's impossibility. Right. Yeah. Its impossibility is a condition for its possibility.
Yeah. I got really hysterical when I was doing the reading earlier, and I looked up the definition of convoluted, because I was like, I know what convoluted is, but it just turns out that it's this intense mathematical thing. So I'm wondering to what extent Žižek's actually using because this is all part of unorientables and stuff, that a so what's the title of the chapter? It's like, does it have convoluted in it? Because he uses the word convoluted a bunch in this chapter, as in the mathematical.
Yeah. It's called Möbius Strip, or the convolutions of concrete universality.
Right. So the technical, just a quick definition, just for us, not for the podcast, intricately folded, twisted, or coiled, which I think, pretty close to just whatever the lay understanding of what convoluted is. But the mathematical one involves two vectors that their relation produces a third that continues this relation.
What's the third term there?
Oh, like I said, I didn't understand it. I was hoping one of you guys did. Or if it's just dumb to even bring it up.
Well,
That's beyond me.
I mean, I think one of the fundamental point he's making about the Möbius strip is that the seeming contradiction between these two things is not cleared up by an outside arbiter of what the truly correct synthesis or thing is, let's say God perhaps, but that the seeming contradiction is inherent to the thing itself.
Like with God. And the next chapter is called The Retarded God of Quantum Ontology. Okay, I had to we would be amiss if we didn't mention that this chapter has Žižek's most hilarious footnote.
Go on.
What is it? I'm going to read it. It's footnote number 38 on page 272. When in a public talk, I recently projected on the screen a short video clip displaying the gradual emergence of a Klein bottle out of a simple strip. The public reacted with embarrassed laughter. And they were right, since the movement of tube-like forms penetrating themselves in a U-turn cannot but generate the impression that something dirty is taking place, although we don't know precisely what. After the presentation, one member of the public approached me and told me that it looked to him as if the scene portrayed a man with such a long penis that he could twist it and penetrate himself anally.
Well, spirit is a boner.
It's back, baby. He brings that up in like the one lecture he does on Orientables.
I love this, man. Like this
he appeals to the audience. He's like, something dirty is happening, isn't it? I'm not the pervert. Something dirty is happening. And he hears this like muffled laughter, and he's like, I'm going to tell you a story about a man that I told this to. He said it looked a lot like, and then it just erupts.
Well, I just love it. He actually decided to include that in this book. That's like, yeah, it's so funny.
Also, I mean, it's a good image of how he's making how sex for Žižek is a kind of ontological claim about reality. Okay, but maybe to tie it all up, like maybe what seems by way of a cop-out, what seems convoluted about the description of a Möbius strip is actually like structural to the Möbius strip, right? Because any attempt you have of approaching it is like starts out on one side of it and
ends up in itself.
Ends up
penetrating itself anally. But like the other two figures here that we should talk about at some point. There's the cross cap and then the Klein bottle. These form a triad for Žižek. We're starting and stopping at the first one.
Maybe we can do a series or something.
Mm-hmm. But until then, go anally penetrate yourself.
We didn't introduce ourselves, but Peter, Will, and Michael, Žižek, and so on. Any last words, fellas? See you guys later.
And so on and so on. 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 And so on and so on.